So I'm gonna do that. All right. And yeah, and then we will be taking questions throughout the webinar. So if you have something pop up, you can put it into the chat box, raise your hand, that sort of thing. So yeah, I guess with that, yeah, well, and I just want to say that we're here with Tom Burakoff, who is associate and consultant with Sport BC, and then Stephanie Rudinsky from Sport BC as well. So with that, I will hand it over to you, Tom.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Now, I have to confess, I can see Sarah, Stephanie, and myself, but I can't see all the participants. So I know you're out there because I can see the numbers. So I hope you're ready for a good evening and do welcome your questions as we go. So on behalf of Sport BC, we're really grateful for this opportunity to chat with the Horse Council of British Columbia and talk about the BC Amateur Sport Fund specifically. So why don't we dig in? Stephanie, unless you wanted to add a couple of words.
Yeah, I just would like to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I have been at Sport BC since September, and I'm the manager of programs. So I'm kind of overseeing a bunch of different programs at Sport BC, working with Tom and the BC Amateur Sport Fund. And so, kind of after this, if there's Sport BC specific questions, I'll give you my contact info and you can ask away.
Thanks so much. So again, as Sarah said, I guess we'll dispense with all the participant introductions, but this is a learning experience for you. So we really want to make sure that your questions, to the best extent that we can, are answered before we leave the webinar. Just a little bit of a background to this. So this whole idea of providing training sessions for provincial multi-sport disability sport organizations and their member clubs across the province really is part of the overall movement by the government of BC. And so we wanted to acknowledge them and to show you that Sport BC is in fact an integral part of the overall sport ecosystem within the province. As you can see there, its primary relationship is through membership by the PSOs, VSOs, MSOs, and then through the member local clubs of those organizations. All of sport is really under the auspices of the Government of BC Sport Branch, and there is a strategic framework for sport in BC. I'm not going to go into too much detail of that, but just to say that while that plan technically has expired, it's still the plan from which sport is being worked on today. And the key rubrics for that plan are to really identify sport participation, athlete development, event hosting under the aspects of affordability, accessibility, equity, inclusion, safety, and ethics. So along with the funding through the BC Amateur Sport Fund that you are able to raise philanthropically, there are a number of other funding sources available through the sport branch, and we wanted to make sure we highlighted those here. I won't list them, but again, just so you're aware, you will get a complete copy of this PowerPoint presentation in PDF format. So if you're worrying about having to take a lot of notes, more focus on what it is you might be gleaning from this, and then any questions you might have, but you don't have to take notes on the presentation per se. So again, this is one of two slides relative to funding opportunities available through the sport branch or through other entities who are supported by the sport branch. And here's another. This includes some of the federal government funding programs which are administered provincially through either UBCM or the government of BC directly as well. And you'll see most of those are primarily related to capital projects. And yet another. And this relates more to funding streams that are available provincially. And you'll see there's some programs that are of the government, some through other entities such as the Recreation Foundation of BC, and yet others through places like Canadian Tire, which are now offering capital project grants through Jumpstart, and then some of the associated crown corporations like the Columbia Basin Trust, Northern Development Initiative Trust, Islands Trust, etc., who are offering grant support for capital projects as well. And again, this is just another part of the sport ecosystem. Along with Sport BC and Via Sport, you have all of these regional sport entities who really make up the Regional Sport Alliance. So again, we try to work together as a system, an ecosystem. You've already been introduced to Stephanie, who's really an integral part of really helping the BC Amateur Sport Fund and Sport BC to fly at the programmatic level. I think it's really important for you to have a context that Sport BC has a wonderful history in our province, established in 1966 by, again, a group of dedicated individuals who recognized the need for sport to not only speak individually as sport organizations, but collectively as a movement, if you will. And today, Sport BC now represents basically 80 such provincial disability and multi-sport organizations across the province. And through its members, in total, we represent nearly a million British Columbians. But again, the voice of Sport BC comes through its membership. And the mission of Sport BC, its vision as well, its values, all speak to the fact that it's here to serve you, member organizations at the provincial and the local level who are part of that entire ecosystem as well. And again, things that Sport BC strives to achieve. And it works in partnership with other organizations, including you, to promote sport and how much sport really is bigger than sport per se. We often don't fully appreciate how much sport affects community life and society in general, whether it's from a health, education, economic, social perspective, but sport is so much bigger than sport. And to promote sport is something that really is one of the core values within society today. It's also here because it works in the collective with all the PSO sports system to bring stability and a singular voice in terms of advocacy upwards with government and with other organizations as well. And again, Sport BC is primarily, with the exception of a small grant from the government of BC for KidSport, it functions exclusively upon earned revenues. So it's a social enterprise in itself. And then, as I said earlier, but just to touch on again, Sport BC does have a channel because it represents you, the provincial sport, multi-sport, disability sport, and local sport organizations. It has a voice before government and before other agencies on your behalf. And I should just add that Sport BC is really diligent about consulting you about what are some of the key messages and issues that you're facing. And oftentimes we hear about affordability, capital projects, and things like that. So about Sport BC, it really does believe that sport does build stronger and better communities. And it does that really through you. And the components of Sport BC include KidSport, the BC Amateur Sport Fund, BC Women in Sport, along with a host of services from its insurance program, which many, many provincial and local organizations utilize, whether it's for directors and officers liability or for risk and other forms of insurance, travel insurance, and what have you. And then for payroll and group benefits for those of you who have staff. And again, it's a vital service to the entire network of provincial sport organizations and all of their member organizations. And if you're not fully familiar with it, I really would encourage you to take a deeper dive about the extent of what these services represent. As I said, KidSport's an integral part of it, and KidSport is now a national movement. But you need to understand, KidSport had its roots here in British Columbia, thanks to Sport BC. And you can see the scope of the work of KidSport. The intent is to provide kids with opportunities which otherwise cannot afford to do so. And well, it's a great story in terms of the number of participants who are using it and the amount of money that's flowing through KidSport. It also is representative of the fact that sport is increasingly difficult from an affordability standpoint. And so the more KidSport grows, the more that reflects that there's a greater need for children and youth to be involved in sport, and affordability is an issue, and KidSport's doing its utmost to try to address that. A little bit about KidSport, and I'll go through these really quickly. Again, launched in 1993. Sport BC was the founder of it. It is now, as I said, a national movement. It really is here to make sure that all kids have an opportunity to participate in sport. And while that's difficult, given affordability, KidSport has done a yeoman's work in terms of raising additional money so that that's possible. It's done it through its member chapters. It's done it through sponsors and partners who are involved with it. But it recognizes that sport participation, especially at the child and youth level, is essential to founding good principles, good lifestyle, and ultimately through the sport development system as well. So here we are. The reality is that cost keeps 1 and 2 kids out of organized sport. And, that's something we really can't afford. And so KidSport does its utmost. You can see the most current impact report, and I know they're working on the 25 year-end report right now, but this just gives you an illustration of the magnitude of which KidSport is working. Some other statistics for your benefit, and some of the larger sport organizations, you can see the numbers of kids going through it, but this is accessible for all sport organizations. So if the Horse Council BC isn't already accessing this and you aren't accessing it for your members and with your members, please do take a good strident look at it. And you can see the growth of the program over even the last 5 years. So this is, again, a new era in terms of fundraising per se, but fundraising doesn't mean about money. It really means about the opportunities provided to more and more kids. I'm going to pass through these really quickly to make sure we get to the essence of our presentation tonight, but really just for you to understand how vital this work is and how simple the process is. One of the things that you'll, I hope, come away with and be most impressed by, whether it's through the KidSport application program for participants or through the BC Amateur Sport Fund, Sport BC has really done an incredible job of trying to keep things as simple. So it's not here to be a heavy laden paper pusher and really take you away from what your core work is to deliver programs and services to your membership. It's tried to do what it needs to do in the most simple, straightforward, clear way possible. And again, the application process for KidSport is super simple. You'll see it in a few minutes with the BC Amateur Sport Fund as well. I won't, again, go into too much more detail here, but just again, so you can see there's 2 different channels mentioning BC Women in Sport. So this is an important facet of making sure there's gender equity within the sports system. And so Sport BC is proud to have BC Women in Sport as a true partner within the organization. In the payroll services and benefits, of course, the insurance program that it has, and now the most important part from this evening's standpoint, the BC Amateur Sport Fund. So the magnitude of this program is really truly significant. Literally hundreds of projects at the provincial and local sport organization level are already within the system today. And again, this slide shows $10 million, and you'll see in a moment that that number is even growing because I've got a little more current statistic for you. But to say there's a lot of philanthropic support, grant support that happens through the BC Amateur Sport Fund because of its unique status. And because of your membership, you're eligible to access that status. And there's a QR code that you can get more information on about it. But again, we'll talk a little bit about it more tonight. The $10 million sounds really impressive, but let me say, with 80 provincial sport organizations, nearly 1 million members through the local organizations, there's a lot more that we can do, and hopefully to advance sport through the BC Amateur Sport Fund. And hopefully, after you come away tonight, you'll be thinking about what projects might we get onto the BC Amateur Sport Fund that you can help in terms of raising support for those things. A little bit more history and chronology. Last year was 2.07 million, which was a really good year. But this past year, we kind of crossed a new barrier. So by the end of 2025, we actually eclipsed $20 million in cumulative funds raised. And this past year alone, $8 million. So we went from 2 million to 8 million. And this is a real attribute to Sport BC trying to get the word out to more and more PSOs and local sport organizations. A really, really important part of making this initiative work, the BC Amateur Sport Fund work, is you knowing about it and you accessing it. Again, $8 million, very impressive, but from my opinion, a career fundraising professional and somebody who's been involved with sport, I believe that we are strictly touching the tip of the iceberg relative to the opportunity in meeting growing needs of sport. So let me set a little bit of context for you. I think it's important for you to understand what we're playing in. So I hope you know that Canada's charitable and not-for-profit sector is the largest, if you will, industrial sector in our nation. Over 2 million Canadians are employed in the sector, over 15 million volunteers, over 15 million volunteers who contribute 1.7 billion volunteer hours, which represents over 1 million FTE in itself. 8.2% of GDP happens through our sector. So you take out us, and we are the social safety net of the province. That all sounds really good and fine, and it is, but you can see when you look at some of these numbers, sadly, sport is one of the lower elements of this 3% culture and recreation. There is so much more that we can do because of organizations like the BC Amateur Sport Fund and across Canada with its partnering organizations that we can help you deliver more philanthropic support that will help us do even more to make our sector stronger. And again, just another illustration of the impact of our sector. You can see whether it's in health, education, social services, faith, or other things. The bottom line here is that if we took out the charitable and not-for-profit sector, we would not know Canada as it is today. And there is no backstop to what we do. So first of all, thank you for all of your hard work as volunteers. And let's realize that our work is important. And especially for sport and recreation, the opportunities are huge ahead of us if we're willing to do just a new part of the work relative to fundraising. This slide is a little bit dated, but it comes from Imagine Canada, and it really demonstrates that, in fact, we have a huge problem in Canada. The social safety net is breaking because government is continuing to evolve some of its programs and services because it's got to make tough choices. It can't continue to tax us at the level it has, and so it pushes things off onto the charitable and not-for-profit sector. And so this social deficit, $25 billion a year, we have a lot of work to do. So again, we should look at this as real opportunity, especially for sport, because this is a greenfield. We have not utilized philanthropy as a true viable fundraising and budgetary planning partner for us. That time is now for us to do that. But let's talk a little bit how philanthropy and fundraising can help sport to thrive. And so, in some of the presentations, and we've been meeting for 4 and 7 hour presentations with PSOs and local sport organizations around the province for the past year or so. And one of the questions we like to ask is, so what is sport doing from your perspective? That's not just related to what's happening on the playing field, on the rinks, et cetera, but what is sport doing? And here is some of the response that we've gotten. Again, I'm not going to read them, but I think it gives you a chance to realize how much sport is bigger than sport. And I'm sure from your perspective, you might have other thoughts about what else sport is doing. And while time and my visibility doesn't permit me to stop and just ask you that question and pause for a minute now, I think it's important that you understand these things and how it relates to the Horse Council BC, because as you think about proposals and cases for support and requests to funders, whether it's philanthropic or sponsorship, when you're able to communicate these things, it affects positively the perception of what sport represents in our communities. So again, consider these things, and we'll show you some resources that you can draw on that might help you elaborate on this even more in whatever proposal you might be developing. But what fundraising is really all about, oftentimes we think it's about money, but it's not. It's about people giving to help people with a purpose. And I want you to read that section in purple, and I'll read it for you, but I want you to really think about this. People don't give to organizations. They give through organizations to help people produce positive, what I call IOC, no, not the Olympics, but impact, outcomes, and change. Let's understand that really clearly. It means organizations have no needs. You were formed to meet needs. And the reason why this understanding is so important is that too often we are very humble or bashful or shy about asking for support. The reality is you're not asking for yourself. You're asking for the beneficiaries who are part of and extended through your organization. So I hope if you can accept this principle that you have no needs, but you meet needs, it'll give you the kind of courage and vitality to say, hey, whatever it takes, I'm going to do to help my sport win. And so fundraising is about team. One of the other realities is that oftentimes, whether it's through a volunteer board or a single volunteer, or if there's a staff person, we often think that fundraising gets delegated to one person. But again, the truth is fundraising about team. Everybody has a role in fundraising. And I'll show you a little bit more of that later. But just understand that no one person in our organization can take responsibility for fundraising. They may have ultimate role to lead that effort, but it is a collective effort per se. And for boards, it's really important to understand that fundraising truly is part of your fiduciary, strategic, and generative responsibility as boards. And then the obvious, but really may want to make sure we understand, because there are four key human elements within fundraising. Donors who make things possible, the beneficiaries, people directly involved in your sport, people within the charity, you and your organizations, provincially or locally. And then, of course, by extension, what you do makes our communities better. So the community, society, world, all of these elements are part of what fundraising is. And again, as you think about, okay, what does that really mean? Well, how am I reflecting in this, my proposals, my narrative, my conversations about fundraising? Again, I'm hoping it gives you a greater sense of lift and confidence that what you do makes a real difference. Fundraising, in the end of the day, is about MVP, mission, vision, purpose, and about IOC, impact, outcomes, and change. And the clearer, the more simple we can get about that makes us more fundable. But for those organizations who think about fundraising as this kind of nitty gritty, awful thing we have to do off the side in order to help the organization work, change that mindset. Fundraising is part of the organization, an integral part of it. It comes out of mission, and it's part of the result building that you want to create. Today, more and more people in organizations who give and support do it with a project and cause orientation. That means, again, they don't give to you, they give to what you do, who you do it for, and the difference that you make. Projects and causes are running the rule of the day with respect to how funding is succeeding. And that's true about individual philanthropy, grant making, even sponsorships. They want to see a cause behind what it is they're supporting, because that's what they're associating with. Said another way, promise-centered, people-focused, project-driven. Promise-centered, people-focused, project-driven. You're inviting people and organizations to support something that you're doing that's going to make a real difference for people directly involved and then downstream from that as well. We think about fundraising often as only about asking, but the reality is asking is just a very small part of what fundraising represents. You know, it takes time to identify and research who might be people who have linkage, ability, and interest to want to support what you're doing, to build the relationships. That's not just cultivation, it's building authentic relationships. And then asking and inviting them into supporting something that together with you, they might believe in. And then a big part of fundraising, which to me is the greatest fun of all, is about the thanking, recognizing, reporting, and connecting. And at the end of the day, what that bottom stewardship piece is really saying is, hey, we're great storytellers. We're demonstrating proof of concept. We're showing, in fact, we did what we said we're going to do, and we can show you the results and the impact of that too. TrueSport produced something in 2022, which is just this incredible dossier of a series of impacts on health, social, economic, and other benefits. And I'm not going to go into more detail with this particular resource now, but know that it's available to you. And in fact, if you want to get a PDF of it, just send me a note and I'm glad to send it on to you. But it's an incredible resource as you think about building your own proposals. Let me give you one illustration. Sport tourism. Sport tourism today in Canada is a $7 billion a year industry. When you host a competition in a local community, the person who comes for a day on average spends $150. The people who come to your community and stay overnight, usually for 2 or 3 nights, or sometimes even more, on average, each person spends about $500. When you do the multiplier effects of how many people come, whether they're playing, coaching, officiating, or spectating, they're part of an entourage that's leaving a local impact on community. I hope when you're asking your local community for sponsorship or support of whatever that is, you're demonstrating to them that you are a huge economic and social impact player in the community. That's just one facet of what this report indicates. It shows things about the health benefits, about the social benefits, about producing good citizens, about saving our healthcare incredible amounts of money because it's proactive rather than being reactive after there's a disease or an issue that happens. It's a really powerful tool for you to use. Likewise, the Community Foundations of Canada partnered with TrueSport a little while ago to demonstrate, in fact, there is a way for sport to win through philanthropy. And again, this is another resource available to you. Likewise, yet another resource, about the measuring the impact of sport and physical activity recreation in Canada. I did keep a couple of slides here because I wanted to show you the power of sport and recreation. So this is the Canadian Lifestyle and Fitness Research Institute partnering with other organizations, but look at the overall impact of sport. Look at the health impact. Look at the social impact and environmental impacts. Like, these are huge things, and if they're not part of what we're talking about when we're asking for support, we can't assume people understand it, because people often think sport is only about what happens on the playing surface, but it's so much more than that. Sport affects Canada in such a positive way in so many diverse ways. Just another slide. Here's that $7 billion statistic. Value of recreation and sport across the country. One of the things we know today through these reports and others is that Canada is facing a burgeoning issue relative to sport-related facilities. So many of them are aging out and they're not safe anymore. What are we going to do? And perhaps there are facilities that you are using at the club level or even provincially that you're experiencing some of this too. So again, part of the work is to make sure people are understanding that by having these facilities in our community, we make our community better. And without them, our community faces huge deficits, both directly but indirectly. Just some other health-related statistics. The cost savings that sport presents are monumental, and yet not fully accounted for even today. I want to say this again. People, donors, don't give to you, they give through you to help people create a difference. That's the outcome and beneficiary side. Keep that in mind, because it's all about making sure that you feel really confident in that, and you're not worried about asking to help keep your lights on or doors open or things like that. And even if that's part of what your essential need is, you're ultimately doing that for a reason, which gets to the beneficiary. Fundraising happens in 3 different dimensions, and we really need to understand this. First, people keep their monies in 3 different large pockets. One is income. So today, most people, only about 5% of their total assets sit in income or cash. Most of their money sits in assets. And then at the time of their demise, when they pass, they have to think about translating those assets into legacy. Fundraising works the same way. And so people give from income, usually smaller regular amounts, from assets with major capital projects, and legacy. Because they've been affiliated with an organization for so long, they want to see that organization thrive even beyond their life. So they make a legacy commitment towards you. I say that because all of these things are now possible through the BC Amateur Sport Fund. You have a vehicle to do that. A real game changer for us, and I'm sure this is probably the focus for you, is funds that typically support one-time initiatives, whether it's constructing facilities, recruiting a high-performance coach, or launching a new special program initiative. And typically, it can be designated for a specific use. And again, the BC Amateur Sport Fund, through its project and application process, allows you to do just that. We've kind of touched on this as well. I just wanted to do a reminder to say this thing is working, so proof of concept is already there. Chat a little bit about that legacy component, wills and bequests. So wills and bequests, these are the 5 major elements through which people make legacy commitments. Will, bequest, and we'll provide you with some wording if you choose to promote that to your memberships. Life insurance, whether it's existing policy or a new policy that they can take out with you as owner and beneficiary. Retirement assets at a certain age. People who have RRSPs that become RIFs and GICs, they need to be disposed of year by year by year. If they don't need those funds because they have other income, rather than just giving that money, or rather than just having that money come to them and being taxed at the highest marginal tax rate, they can choose to gift that to you and reduce their taxation. So this is where we bridge philanthropy with strategic capital and asset planning with the donor. Other assets with capital gains, whether it's securities or recreational land or things like that. Again, if they choose to donate the asset, we can help them from a tax standpoint as well. And then other forms of gift in kind. The asset itself must be saleable, but in fact, there's a vehicle to do it. This is part of the offer that the BC Amateur Sport Fund now makes available to you. And how does that work? Well, here's just an illustration of the actual language that you would use. And what I would just suggest is, rather than thinking you have to go through this entire process yourself, you can share this with your legal counsel, or you can share this with your members for them to share with their legal counsel. And you can also get a hold of Sport BC, because we'll help you with any questions you have about this. But don't forget about legacy as an integral part of supporting Sports Council BC and its member organizations today, tomorrow, and forever. The designation of registered retirement instruments, whether it's a bank or insurer or other form of manager of those assets, there are forms that you can do to designate a charitable beneficiary, which will help prevent the heavy taxation that comes on those assets on the death of the last surviving partner or spouse. So this can really, really provide a significant tax savings to an individual's estate. Some of the background that's really important for you to know when you think about fundraising: your mission, vision, purpose, the priorities that you have, and help you develop a case for support. Understanding who your donors are and their interests, and then beginning to plan how you're going to engage them. And then having the space and time to be able to do that. And that's why it's a team process, because usually one person doesn't know everybody and can't do it all themselves. But I would say today, more than any time before, that donors also come with expectations, and that's why precision is important. Don't just ask them to give to you. Become really excellent storytellers. Tell them what it is you're going to do with the resource, who the beneficiaries are. That really ignites them to want to be generous. Essentially, when we fundraise, we're making a promise. And the promise is that we're going to create that positive impact, outcomes, and change. And it's important that whatever you ask for, you feel that you can actually do. And so that's the model in its simplest terms. And then the whole cycle of fundraising: measure, report, thank, recognize, repeat. That is a very simplified way of trying to keep donors. You don't want transactions. You want donors who are in a relationship with you, who are going to stay with you for the long haul. And by doing the measure, report, thank, recognize, repeat, you'll have a better likelihood of achieving that. Again, this is just another indication of the whole fundraising process. I won't go through it again because I've kind of spoken to it, but I've highlighted those areas that really occupy most of the time in fundraising. And really keep that in mind. Important for you to be good storytellers, as I said. And your why, your organization's why, tied to your mission, vision, purpose, tied to the reason that you're taking on a specific program or initiative, building a building, whatever that might be, is tied to your MVP. Show them the challenge that you have in doing it. Always try to keep it on a positive rather than a negative. Try to be as tangible or specific in what you're asking them for. And all of that says to this point in time that you know the donor. So hopefully that's the case. Show them what the money will do based upon what you anticipate and why you're doing it. And whatever you do, do not stop if you hear no. No doesn't mean no to you. Don't take it personally. No means it may not be the right time, the right amount, the right project, or whatever. By you keeping the conversation live, that means that you're not ending it, or you're not treating them as somebody that you're writing off. The fact that you're having a meeting or a conversation with somebody is an indication that they're interested in what it is that you're doing. And then, of course, be quick about recognizing, acknowledging, and talking with them and showing the significance of your work. Reminder about people not giving to your organization, they give through you. This is a little more of a rationale behind that. Fixing their problem, providing a bigger solution, doing something they're interested in, feeling like they've made a difference. You're making them the hero of the story, if you will. How do you build a case? How do you build that proposal? Well, you begin by answering some of these questions. And again, this is an outline for you, and there'll be several points along this line. You define the challenge, the issue, the problem, the solution to it, and why your organization is uniquely qualified to solve the problem. And then talk about your plans for the future and that call to action. It's the basis for your why. It ties to your mission, vision, values, goals, objectives, and purpose. Where I like to begin is to try to have an organization, a client, begin with the one sentence theory of change. Because of why we do what we are doing, where it is, to help who the beneficiaries are, what it is we're going to do, how it's going to make a difference, and when it's going to make a difference. Now, I didn't provide you with an example here, but keeping that as tight and concise, that becomes tantamount to your elevator speech. And when you have real clarity about your one sentence theory of change, you're going to be even more confident that the project you're doing is worthwhile. Getting to why, which is all about fundraising, is all these things: leadership, communication, purpose, clarity. Think about you're building a movement because you don't just want transactions. You don't just want a gift. You want people to join your cause for a long time. That's why it's a movement. Make them feel like it's something significant. That's more successful. That's more important than success. And yes, that's even more important than necessarily winning the competition. Not that that's not important too. Give them that emotive piece and help them understand that through them and with them and through them again, you're pursuing opportunity and you're fulfilling the potential of people that you want to help. We won't spend long here. This is a tool that I use it for some of you who may be with a little more long in tooth like me. Peter Drucker's 5 most important questions, which I've adapted for the purpose of fundraising, and this really is a useful tool as well. It really brings you to clarity of organization, and it aligns with your strategic planning. And if you don't have a strategic plan, this is a really good rubric in order to help you fundraise based out of a planning model. What does it all do? Sets out the priorities, illustrates the investment required, talks about people, community, change, impact, outcomes, helps demonstrate a value proposition. And increasingly today, we need to be tangible about what's the ROI, the value proposition, the SROI, if you will. And again, there are tools and resources that can help you be clear about that, even if it is both anecdotal and based upon other examples. We can be more clear about what the value proposition is. Important in your communication when you're asking for support, it's not just about the organization's voice, which is important too. Think about the beneficiary. Think about the rider, perhaps, who might have an experiential piece that their commentary might add a real sense of gravitas to what it is you're asking. Provides the framework for the conversations and ensures in as simple and clear terms that the prospective donor has clarity about what it is you're asking them to do and what difference it's going to make. This is a kind of another illustration of the pyramid of giving within fundraising, and it's trying to show you, the income assets legacy piece, the stages of relationship from identification through investment, and then there's another element of that, what I call inspiration, which keeps people coming back, and it's a feedback loop. But then there's the various tools. And am I saying you should be doing all these things to fundraise? Absolutely not. But you should do some of these things if you want to succeed. Important to demystify a little bit where funds from a philanthropic standpoint generally come. We often think of corporations as the big provider, but in reality, most generosity happens through individuals and families. Some of that today is through foundations and donor advised funds and other intermediary types of organizations. But at the end of the day, it's individuals and families who give the most support. Corporations, businesses, not insignificant by any stretch, because sometimes the individual makes their actual giving or sponsorship through their companies. And then employee groups and foundations other than those connected to individuals, like corporate foundations or community foundations. And don't forget about government. And then other what we call non-qualified donees or other service organizations, professional and fraternal organizations within your community. So take a holistic view about who's in your community, who's in your ecosystem in terms of potential funders, and then begin to build opportunities around who they are as well. What does it really look like to fundraise? It requires leadership, that case, constituency, good communication, clarity and simplicity about process. Make it easy for the donor to give. And again, I'm going to come back and say, a lot of this you don't have to worry about because Sport BC and the BC Amateur Sport Fund has made it super simple for people and organizations to give to projects that you're leading. Acknowledge and recognize them. Give them the story that they've made an impact by doing what you said you were going to do, and show them that. And then When you launch a project, be sure you have the capacity to execute, to actually do something to fundraise so that you can actually get to the outcomes you're seeking. Having a plan, making sure there's time and timing for fundraising. It is part of your sport development organization, whether you accept that or not, because fundraising is part of the fuel that makes you work. Have that ability to give it your best effort in a timely manner. Keep a donor-centered mindset. Remember that inventory of stories, and remember about connecting people to people. One of the best things you can do as an organization is bring people on site, whether it's whatever the domain is. Have them and walk them through a tour. Have them meet some of your participants or coaches or whomever that might be. It really makes things real for them. And in that, you can embed more stories, and then you can embed the ask as well. For those of you who are looking at this from a sponsorship standpoint, a couple of other resources. And remember, sponsorship is not philanthropy, but it's quid pro quo. You're providing them with tangible recognition in return for their investment. Most of the reason why sponsors get engaged with you is you have a constituency whose demographic aligns with what product or service they offer. You have to be good with that and, in fact, make and open those doors of opportunity for them to do just that. I showed it on that slide of the giving pyramid, but this is just another illustration about the 7 I's of fundraising. You see the inspiration feedback loop. Fundraising is a process. It's donor-centered, begins with identification, qualification. I don't like cultivation. I need to change this. It's really about building relationship. I don't like solicitation. I mean inviting people, because solicitation has this inference that we're selling or that we have some way to really impart control over the donor. One of the most important parts of fundraising today is we honor donor choice. They're choosing to give because you've informed them and inspired them in the right way. And then, of course, to steward them. What are the best ways to fundraise? Obviously, even though technology has brought so much opportunity and it is a great tool, there's nothing that still beats face-to-face. And you can see as you go down that list, the more impersonal that we get, while we may be able to reach more money and we may be able to be successful at times, ultimately, those larger gifts of assets and legacy are going to come through your ability to have one-to-one personal contact with the donor. Again, a reminder, as you can see on that right side of the slide, do not try to do everything here, but choose what works for you within your organization, its resources, but do something when you choose that you are going to fundraise. It doesn't just happen without that. Reminder, MVP and IOC. This is probably the most complex and confusing slide, but it really does represent all the things that fundraising is. There are the psychological dimensions of it. There's process. There's human needs that you're addressing. And then there's vehicles and tools. Sport is bigger than sport. Sport and fundraising doesn't just happen, just like sport doesn't happen. This is a model, if you will, and you can pick and choose how you utilize this, but realize that once you're into this, sport is really made better by fundraising. One of my reminders always, why us, why now, why you? When you're clear about these 3 things, you're clearer about fundraising and being able to move forward. How do we measure? Again, not giving you all the details today, but these are resources that you can draw upon so you don't have to reinvent. How do I measure my success? There are tools right here that you can use. And if it would be helpful, again, I can give you either the PDF or the link through Sarah to these resources that you can just access and begin to look at. Likewise, the United Nations has developed a tool that ties its 17 SDG, International Sustainable Development Goals, to sport. And there are a host of resources here that talk about how sport influences food security, housing, education, poverty, what have you. And again, I think you could extrapolate from this resource into your own context to say, maybe not all of them, but some of them are relevant to you. And you could use that statistic or proof that demonstrates that sport, in fact, is such a huge game player in our world today. That essential measurement always comes back to IOC. People care mostly about impact, outcomes, and change. Just a little bit about collaboration. in order to fundraise, donors are expecting that organizations to work together. And I would say that the biggest demonstration of that in the sport context is that provincial, Horse Council BC, and its member clubs and organizations. If you can demonstrate that you're working hand in hand together, that'll be a big, big plus for you. I'm sure that already exists, but just an invitation for you to think about how do we make that relationship stronger and better, because when we do, we convey something that's even more effective to those who are asking to invest in and through us. I'm probably boring you with this, but people give to people because you're going to make something better. People also give where they're most interested. They like to see sport work in a unified system. That's back to the collaboration piece. That's one of the great things about Sport BC. Sport BC doesn't do things for Sport BC. It only takes action when it can help its member organizations. That's you. Philanthropic support should be incremental and not replace other sources. Well, there's a truth to that, but there's also a new reality. I think we're finding today that as government continues to devolve its support of sport, it's becoming increasingly important that philanthropic support does fill the gap. And so there's a greater urgency there. And then finally, that value proposition again for sport, helping sport. Communication, timely stewardship, following through, especially as it relates to funders. When they have timelines about grant reporting, all that kind of detail, make sure you're documenting that and honoring that, because don't just think about the grant you got, but think about the future grant that you may get because you've stewarded them really, really well. Fundraising can be enhanced significantly through the BC Amateur Sport Fund. So a little bit about the fund again. You've seen the success we're already realizing. Again, this is the starting point, scratching the surface, so much more. Can my organization or club use the BC Amateur Sport Fund? So the Horse Council BC is a member organization of Sport BC. So if you're a member of Horse Council BC, that means you as a club can access the BC Amateur Sport Fund. I hope that makes sense and is clear to you. Within the BC Amateur Sport Fund, there are a series of policies and procedures that relate to how the fund functions. None of this is complex. All of it's online, and I'll show you a link to it, but don't really be overly worried about it. They take care of the actual gift processing, whether it's securities or other forms of in-kind on your behalf. It really is a tool that's made as simple and accessible as possible for you. Sarah, maybe I'll just pause to see right there if there may be any questions from the group.
Yeah, I don't see anything coming through the chat quite yet, but if maybe we give people a moment. I also see that if you do raise your hand, I do have an option to allow you to talk as well. So if anybody wants to ask anything verbally, that's an option.
Thanks. I'll just keep going for a moment.
Okay, sounds good.
So how does an organization open a project or club open a project with the BC Amateur Sport Fund? There's an application form, and it is a simple one-page form. Description of the project, how the proceeds will be used, how the project will assist in promoting and developing amateur sport. And I say it at a national level, but realistically, it's how it relates to you because you're part of a national system ultimately. Copy the budget, any promotional materials, and it's really as simple as that. It goes into Sport BC. There is an adjudication committee of 2 or 3 people, and literally within a day or two, they'll review it. They'll make sure that you have the endorsement of your provincial body. It goes forward, and then your project is mounted for public display, and you'll be given confirmation, notification that you can now go out and raise money, and it give you a demonstration of how you can be inviting people to make gifts through the BC Amateur Sport Fund for your project. What are eligible projects that a club or organization can do? So oftentimes it's related to program development of athletes, coaches, officials. It may involve a scholarship program, costs for team travel, club development, capital costs, facility or equipment costs, even the hiring of a high-performance coach. Those are all projects per se. Projects is broadly interpreted, but it's, again, how does project work within your sports milieu? And that's what's really important. We're not in the business of trying to say no to you. We're trying to get you to a place where the project could be mounted and approved so that it can be promoted, and then you can go out and raise funds within your constituency. When it is a capital project, and again, this doesn't necessarily complicate the form, but it helps you think about, okay, is this project ready for fundraising? So do you have a detailed description and why you're trying to undertake this project? You have a budget for it. Have you sources of financing? So sometimes there are projects under the fund that are worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and knowing that some of that money may need to come from senior levels of government or from community or from a private benefactor who's already donated, understanding how we're going to get to the finish line before we begin is a really important process. Quotes or estimates where you do or are building something. Ideally, that would really further help validate and in fact you're a long ways around along the line in terms of getting to a project. Proof of ownership if it is about building a facility on a piece of land so that in fact you've got the mandate to do what you're going to do, that you won't have any sense of somebody's going to challenge it halfway through the process. Excuse me. Building development permits or detailed plans, letters of support from municipal government or other sources that give you even greater credibility in the lens of people that you may be fundraising with. And then finally, a project schedule or milestone of timing. When do you hope to have this project done? Those are just factors as you're building the application that would be really important for you to consider. So important to explain just a little bit. The BC Amateur Sport Fund has a charitable registration number, which is tied to the Canadian Council of Provincial and Territorial Sport Federations, which is an umbrella agency that was established as a registered Canadian Amateur Athletic Association, a national body, which is the Canada Revenue Agency. Charities Director provides the status for all charities in Canada. For sport, the only way that sport is eligible for charitable receiving is through an RCAAA. And typically an RCAAA has to be a national body, usually national sport organizations. Through the innovation and creativity of Sport BC and the BC Amateur Sport Fund, the National Sport Trust, the CCPTSF was formed. This again started in BC but was now given to Canada. There are chapters across the province. Bottom line here is that because you have an approved project, you can use this number to indicate that in fact you are working under the auspices of this RCAAA, Registered Canadian Charity. So there you go. It really gives you that sense of you are credible. For some grantors, they need to know what that number is, especially foundations, because they need to give to other qualified donees. This is essential information for you. There's more information. I'll show you some of that in just a second. There's a detailed FAQ on the Sport BC website. There's more information in a project manual. There's a project application. And when you're ready, after you fundraised and want to take that money out for the project, you have a simple one-page grant request form because there's a feedback loop that's needed for accountability purposes. And then if in fact the project needs to take longer, there's a renewal form. So let me just jump right there now. Here's kind of an overview of the application. And you can see that everything that Sport BC and the BC Amateur Sport Fund does is to, as simple and straightforward terms, not to burden or take up too much of your time. That's the application overview. Here's the application. And please, I hope you know, this is a one-page application intended not to be onerous upon you, but really intended to give the essential information that's needed to get your project reviewed and approved and activated. Here's the grant request form. So when you've raised the funds, the money is sitting in the fund, you want to access them, again, a one-page access form. Here's what you're reaffirming that it's for. It's for the project and the project number that was approved, that you're going to use the funds for the granted purposes. Where do they send the check to? An authorized person gets reviewed and approved very quickly by Sport BC and the funds are released to you. Where that project may need more time or where you've decided that project needs to stay active for either several years or indefinitely, all you need to do is simply update and provide a project renewal application to Sport BC, the BC Amateur Sport Fund, to say that this project will continue on for a period of time. And there's no limitation on that per se. Again, I hope you can see that you don't do all of these things at once, but everything is made and geared to be as simple and streamlined and straightforward for your benefit. So it's not causing you a whole lot of headache or hardship or time in order to get it activated. This is an excerpt from the Sport BC, BC Amateur Sport Fund website. There's a project manager manual. There's a link to it, link to the form itself, the grant request form, project renewal form. It's all there for your easy access, if you will. And then what does Sport BC do through the BC Amateur Sport Fund? It has a listing of all of the projects that are active. And so you click on find a project and away you go, and you can find your project as one of the many. You will also get a URL link for your use to mount on your website, whether it's with the Horse Council BC or the local club per se, so that you only have that link and you could profile it on your website as well. Now, I've talked a little bit already about the legacy portion. I can go into more detail, but only to say to you, this is something that I would encourage you to think about, perhaps down the road a little bit if you haven't already activated a fundraising program, to take a passive approach, which is more about let's give them information about how this is possible, rather than trying to be very proactive and hosting a number of financial planning or charitable gift planning sessions right now. Get the information out there, keep it out there. It reminds them that, in fact, your sport has a long sense of longevity, and gifts can certainly serve beyond the lifetime of any individual. Reminder again, all of this information is available to you in terms of the right wording to be used, and from a legal standpoint, whether it's a will or retirement instrument, having the exact wording is important from a legal context. This is that form that you would use, or if a donor would use it. In fact, they're going to be gifting you part of the remainder of their retirement assets. Again, a very simple form that's available through any of the institutions who are managing the funds on the donor's behalf. What isn't known oftentimes or promoted actively by that institution, though, is that this vehicle is possible. Because at the end of the day, this helps to mitigate taxation for the estate of the individual. Life insurance, just a little bit of information. Life insurance proceeds, I think as we know, are paid out on the demise of the individual, and the death benefit is eligible for a charitable receipt to the estate. If in fact you've just named, for example, Horse Council BC or your club as the beneficiary, there's additional wording that's needed to that, but for the sake of the illustration, you're named as the beneficiary but not the owner. On the death of the individual, the estate would receive a charitable receipt for the value of the death benefit. If in fact the owner decides they've got an existing policy or purchases a new policy, and they make you the owner and beneficiary, then the premiums that are paid on that policy are eligible for a charitable tax receipt through the BC Amateur Sport Fund. This can be part of an overall estate plan for the individual, but also for you to help generate the thinking that fundraising can work today, tomorrow, and forever. And there's some contact there. The Vice President of Finance at Sport BC, who also handles a lot of the details of the BC Amateur Sport Fund behind the scenes, Michael Peters, can be an additional resource to you. Of course, we are not the financial or legal experts for any donor. Make sure that they're consulting their family, their financial, their legal, and other professional advisors about wanting to make a legacy commitment. A reminder, another vehicle beyond the BC Amateur Sport Fund is KidSport. And it's an incredible resource about having kids and children being able to access sport in other ways that they may not. There are chapters in 39 BC communities, and if there's not a community chapter, there's a provincial chapter as well that has some grant-making capacity. All of this information, I wish I had all of this committed to memory and it was just me, but it comes from these legitimate sources, and I wanted you to be assured that it doesn't just come flippantly or without any real sense of curation on our part. This is my contact information. I hope that, again, if you have any questions, that you'll feel at liberty to do so. Stephanie, I do apologize. I should have had your contact information on here, but perhaps Sarah could share that as well with the group when you get the PDF of this presentation. And I'll say thank you, but then I also want to say, also available in PDF form are the supplementary report on participation, which shows all the value of participation in sport. Another report done on the impact of sport. I can share that with you. Hope on the Horizon, a report commissioned jointly through Sport Law, True Sport, the Canadian Centre for Sport and Ethics, as well as Sport BC. All of this is made possible by the BC Amateur Sport Fund, powered by Sport BC for you, not for itself. Sport BC has a limited fee that it charges for all of the giving that comes through it. That's 5%. Most of it is to cover the cost of gift processing, because whether it's, paying to for credit card fees or the administrative costs that come with it, but there's a 5% fee. That is nominal relative to what the costs of fundraising are generally. I just want you to know that. And then if there is any surplus left out of that 5%, all of that is redirected back into programs that are for your benefit at the provincial and local sport level. Here we go. Helping Sport BC members and their affiliates with clubs with national fundraising initiatives. And I mean local, provincial, and national fundraising initiatives. Scan here for more information. And of course, Sport BC is just a call away, an email away, or however it is you'd like to reach them and us and me. Now that is all.
Great. Thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate that. I did see a question come through from somebody on the call. So maybe we'll just get to those now if that works all right for you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so Angie is asking about lottery funds. And lottery funds used to be used for some sport associations. She's just wondering if that's not an option anymore.
Well, gaming is certainly an option. And lottery funds is a choice made by government of BC to direct lottery funds how they direct. Right now, my understanding is most lottery funds are directed into general revenues. That said, again, there are gaming opportunities, whether it's through casinos or raffles, it's at bingos, etc. There's also organizations who run lotteries, such as the big Kids Connects for Kids Foundation, which has a significant lottery in place. But lottery funds per se are not something that we directly access through Sport BC and the BC Amateur Sport Fund.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. So it sounds like it's an option, but just not something you guys do.
Right.
All right.
And sorry, Sarah, back to the sport branch. Some of their community gaming grants actually come through whether it's lotteries or their share of other gaming proceeds.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. I'm just gonna check the chat as well. Looks like I think Stephanie, you put up your contact details in the chat, so that's perfect. And if anybody else has any questions, certainly raise your hand or just put it in the Q&A box or in the chat box, whichever works for you. That's great. Awesome. Just give people here just a moment or two if they're just busy typing away and everything. But yeah, it was a very informative webinar, and I think it's great to know like there's that option there for clubs that are part of Horse Council BC to like access this fund and everything. So I think that just opens another door and everything, which is great. And I was it was interesting you brought up KidSport as well because I'm the manager of coaches and everything. So I do get KidSport contacting me saying, are your coaches like certified and everything? And if they are, we're able to, say yes as coaches and yeah, please fund those kids. So it is kind of cool that I'm seeing the direct direct KidSport things come through. So
Wonderful.
yeah. Oh, looks like. Oh, Laura's just having trouble seeing Stephanie's info here. Sorry, guys. Let me see. Let me see if I can just put this through. Okay. I just resent that, Laura, so maybe you're able to let me know if you received that. That works out. And another option too is that I can always I'll make sure when I send out the slides and everything that I send out your guys' contact details as well, and all of that. So
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah.
perfect. All right. Well, I don't see any questions coming through right now. But it does look like everybody, it does have your contact details now and everything. So yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And yeah, thanks so much, Tom and Stephanie, for joining us tonight. And yeah, everybody take care and have a good night.
You too. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
All right, thanks. Bye now.
Bye-bye.